All right, guys, we're live, and we're here with Taylor. So, questions and answers. Taylor, do you want to? I don't know if you need an introduction or to say hello or what it is you're looking to talk to people about here.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. And usually I just kind of take questions from the audience about Laravel, or features or development, or how it's built or how I work on it and stuff like that. So yeah, just whatever y'all want to hear about, really. Just pretty open discussion.
So then I'd like to open the floor. I mean, you guys, I'm sure some of you have questions. Just throw your hand up and I'll try and, we'll try and get you all. We're going to do this about 30 minutes, 50 minutes for overlap, and we want to be respectful of Taylor's time. So who's going to be the first person to ask a question?
I have one, if no one wants to start.
All right, James, you're up.
Yeah, do you think there'll ever be a collection, like an SPL collection or something for PHP? Do you think that will ever happen, or if that would be something that would be useful?
I feel like I saw something similar to that recently. It had a weird name, but it had functions like map and other type of stuff. I think it would be pretty useful, especially, of course, if it was faster. That would be really useful. Collections, is obviously a very heavily used feature, I think, and is, only getting more heavily used. And, I think Adam Wathan's book sort of helped bring it to a lot of developers' minds that might not have known about it, or might not have known that it was even in Laravel. It's actually been in Laravel for a very long time. I remember talking about it at the very first Laracon, which just had about 80 or 90 people at it. Someone asked me a question about it, and it was pretty new then. But of course, I use it every day. So, I mean, and any speed boost would be nice, because some of the, like the higher order type collection functions are slower than like a for each counterpart. Just usually it's on such an insignificant number of items, in most of my applications, at least, it's usually only at most maybe 30 to 50 items that I'm dealing with, that it doesn't really matter. But some people do work on, a lot bigger data sets. So it would be useful to have a sort of optimized collection thing for that. But I don't know. I don't know if that's ever been proposed or not.
Yeah, I'm sure just like some people, they love and hate magic. So, probably just one of those things like arrow functions that maybe or maybe doesn't get in, depending on who's voting on that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
That's cool. So do we have any questions from the audience now that we've started the conversation a little bit? Got one over here. Yeah, what's your question?
Yeah, hi, Taylor. Partly out of morbid curiosity, and partly what's a good idea. I'm taking a current Laravel site in 5.2, and I want to upgrade it. And the upgrade process seems to be to take it to follow the instructions, and take it to 5.3, then to 5.4, and 5.5, and so on. That is correct, yes?
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way, just based on the documentation, to follow it out that way. And the upgrades at first, I think, will be a little bit more painful than the upgrades on the back end, because the 5.4 to 5.5 and 5.5 to 5.6 are very easy upgrades. The other ones, I wouldn't say they're extremely hard, but they're a little more involved than the others. But yeah, probably your best bet is to take it one step at a time through the upgrade guides all the way to current. It's going to get easier as you go, so that's kind of nice.
So, okay, on that, devs that that are doing upgrade work, with the life cycle of a Laravel website, is it better to stay within the branch or to work on upgrading continuously?
Do you mean, is it better to stay on the current version at all times? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, in terms of the life cycle of the project, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I usually do, but I guess it depends sort of what your resources are and stuff. Like I said, I'm trying to make that easier, as Laravel gets We're quite a few versions in now, and the framework's, I think, stabilized, and the upgrades are getting easier. So especially now, I think I would definitely recommend that, since the changes are usually not too drastic. I usually try to stay pretty up to date. There's also, of course, Laravel Shift, which I don't maintain myself, but is seems to be a fairly popular service for upgrading Laravel projects, since it will basically link to your repository and then send you a pull request with all of the changes for that version. You can do it step by step, per version. And even if I usually find that to be a decent starting point, and then I can kind of dig through it and make sure that nothing was missed. But overall, I think it's a pretty decent starting point as long as your application's, fairly straightforward. Seems to be a decent thing to at least try, especially since it's only a few dollars. In the scheme of things, like the development time for upgrading an application, if you're paying a developer's a lot of money. So it's worth a shot if it's just, $4 or $5, and you can take a look at it, and at least gives you a head start.
What was that tool called?
It's Laravel Shift. It's laravelshift.com, I think. Yep, all one word. Looks like they go all the way back to Laravel 4.2.
If there's any URLs or apps that Taylor mentioned or anybody mentioned, just ask it on the meetup group. We'll make sure to put up a link to Laravel Shift and any others that come up.
Yeah, and with Laravel Shift, like I said, it's not, I don't make any money off that, so I'm not trying to sell you that. So it's not really to my benefit. I'm just trying to throw some ideas out there, that it seems to be a pretty useful tool.
So I'll jump in with a question with regard to, I think it might have been a year ago, you were going through the entire framework and going through class by class, upgrading, optimizing.
Yeah.
I want to know, is that something you do yearly or just when the mood strikes? Like, is that going to come up in 5, 6, 7?
No, because I've been more strict ever since then, in terms of making sure things are formatted properly, make sure things are named properly, and I'll clone things down and kind of massage stuff into how I like it now. But so it's not something I do yearly. I think when I did it on 5.4, it had been really a couple years since I'd done that. And in the early days, like in Laravel 1 and Laravel 2 and Laravel 3, I did that every release. So because it was just like a customary thing I did. But as sort of time went on, that got harder and harder to do, as the framework got bigger. So with 5.4, I really wanted to do that again. And it was really one of the best things I've done, I think, in a while, because it cleaned up so much stuff and the code was so much more readable. And also it just was a good time for me to sort of review the whole framework again, because I'd forgotten aspects of it, I'd forgotten aspects of how Eloquent worked, particularly around global scopes and various intricacies of how the ORM worked. I'd forgotten some about how validation worked for complex array situations. And I just wanted to refresh my memory, on how some of those things work so that I had a better grasp of them in my head. But no, it's not something I plan to do for 5.6, because like I said, now I think about it more. I don't want to have to really do that again. So I try to, every pull request that comes in, I really make sure it looks okay. And like I said, clone it down and make tweaks to it if I have to, just so it kind of stays in shape and stays really high quality. For me, it was just a personal thing. I always feel more comfortable using tools that I know are built pretty well and with attention to detail. So even my own tools, I don't really want to use it if I feel like it's just thrown together, crap. I want it to feel like it was, had care and thought put into it. So that was why I wanted to do it, just so I feel more comfortable about the whole.
Great, that's a very thorough answer. Does anyone else have any questions right off the top of their heads now? Oh, we got one back here.
So you mentioned about looking at pull requests. What are you looking for? What should we consider before sending you a pull request?
I think one thing that's important with pull requests is sort of bang for buck, where it's how much value is it getting out of the least impact to the code base? So I think, so like the worst end of that scale would be something that's not super valuable to many users and is a huge amount of code changes. That would be like your worst possible pull request. But then on the other end, something that's really helpful and valuable and like, why haven't we had this the whole time? And it's only, 10 lines of code. That's, the best kind of pull requests that I really want to see. And then there's sort of like, your average pull request is somewhere in the middle probably. But really a lot of it is not so much, in terms of making a good pull request, I feel like a lot of it's not so much in the code per se, it's just explaining what you want to get in the framework and what benefit is it going to give to the average user. Because some pull requests come in with basically no description at all. They're just the code and then like a title. And then some come in with minimal description, but the best ones, it's like a description, code example of how to use it, what it looks like, any breaking changes that might be in the pull request. It's helpful if those are noted. If there's relevant tests, which for testing now, I usually recommend people just write an integration test, and we have an integration test folder in the framework where you can actually write your test like you would as if you had a full Laravel application instance. So you can write a database migration and run it before your test so that you have the database tables you need to run the test. And so it's a lot easier to get started with testing, even the core framework stuff now. And some of our eloquent tests, we moved over to that style of testing because the other, trying to mock everything is just not very, it just doesn't end up being very useful for some of our tests. So yeah, trying to get the most bang for buck, most value in the least amount of code, and then also just explaining it, as if you were explaining it to a total beginner, because, that's basically how I'm approaching your pull request is, I've never seen the code and I'm a beginner at this feature, and, you have to sort of sell it in a way of what you're trying to get into the framework.
That's great. I actually have a follow-up question, if I could. Time moves on, there'll be less and less of those 10-liner, 5-liner features that will actually be added just because the coverage of the functionalities gets so high when you have, close to 40,000 stars on a repo. You must eventually get to a point where the surface area for improvement is actually shrinking as the project gets older and grows. Do you think that's the case, or do you think every release has it?
They're usually, I do think overall it's probably trending that direction. I don't see how it really couldn't over time. There's always a few hidden gems, that come up. Like in 5.6, there's the scheduler where you can schedule a task to run only on one server, which is a really cool feature and I don't remember it being a huge amount of code to add. So that was kind of a nice one. I'm trying to think what else. But yeah, I mean, fewer and fewer over time. And also I myself, and have spent more time the past couple of years writing, sort of add-on packages for Laravel like Spark and Horizon. And they're not things that are really core to the framework, I think, because you said there's only so much more we could really add to the core of the framework in terms of just like sizable, valuable features, I think. So most of my work lately has been on sort of fleshing out the edges of the ecosystem and, that are still nice things to have, but they're things that you can't just like shove into a core of a framework. Like I can't really, I could, but I don't really want to put a whole, Q user interface in the whole core framework repository. So it makes sense to build that as a package. And I'm working on another package right now that I hope to show at Laracon. It's kind of a similar situation. It's not something I would want to shove in the core of the framework, but it's something that I think would be very nice to have. So for me personally, it's been trending that way where I don't find myself, adding huge chunks of code to the framework.
Great. We have another question? Yeah.
Hi, Peter. I'm wondering what's your stance on having compatible standards with PHP frameworks? I know there's a strict rule for PHP standards. I'm wondering what's your stance on it. If you have a chance to evolve further.
Can someone repeat it for me? It was a little far from the mic, I think.
Basically about standards between frameworks, I guess somewhere around like opinion on Fig, I guess.
Oh, okay. Some of the stuff has been helpful. I think especially in the early days, Fig was really helpful. Of course, with all the standards, probably all of us use now, like a PSR 0 and PSR 4 auto loading, and then PSR 1 and 2 code formatting seems like it's basically become de facto standard. And then also PSR 3 logging. If you use Laravel, you may not know it, but you are actually using a PSR 3 compatible logger, since we use monolog. I haven't been that crazy excited about it lately. With PSR 7, the request stuff I didn't feel like was super user friendly, or at least would needed to be. If I was going to use it in the framework, it would need like a lot of helpers to sort of make it feel just like nicer. And then the container interop stuff actually wasn't bad. I don't know if we'll actually have any big use for it, but overall, I thought it was pretty decent. And the middleware compatibility layer, I also wasn't super excited about. I just didn't really have a big use case for it personally. And I think middleware should probably be so thin anyway that it's not really cumbersome to sort of write a shim for a middleware in another framework. So I don't know. I really liked the early stuff that Fig did, but over time, I think the main purpose of Fig has kind of been solved or served, in the sense that they got auto loading and code formatting standardized for basically all of PHP, which is a pretty big deal. And I think was the main thing that helped a lot of, with Composer, we have a good package auto loading system and all that. So I don't know, I think it's decent. Maybe more good stuff will come out of it, but I think the best stuff is kind of already passed, and we're all using it already. So
Great. More questions?
We had one over here. You might have to come up if you.
You might have to come a little bit closer if you want to hear. That's good.
I found it. It was sounding like it was an issue. We picked up that we have a project in Laravel 5.2, and we picked up that the scheduler defaults the locale to US English, and we had an issue with running reports on multiple locales. The way that we thought of solving it is, whenever the user puts in a request for a report or so forth, that would log which locale he's based, and then we have the locale linked to the schedule. Would there be a different or a better way of doing this? And has there been any changes to the schedule in the later versions?
I can't really think of a better way to do it. When you were describing it, my answer was going to be how you said you were doing it. So I don't really know of a better way to do it. And there really hasn't been any changes to the scheduler around that kind of functionality. So yeah, probably you're just going to have to store the requested locale, like you said, and then use it when you actually make the report. I don't really think there's going to be any other way to work around that.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Enjoy the question.
Hey Taylor, just wondering if there were any PHP features, like core PHP features, that you were really looking forward to, or that you were hoping to see in the future that would help Laravel either get rid of some code that it has, or that you would be able to take.
Let me think. Recent PHP features that have been pretty nice. One small one, I guess, was that double question mark syntax, where you don't have to do, is set, array key, then have a ternary statement for getting the value. You can just do the double question mark. That actually cleaned up quite a bit of code. PHP features I would like to see would be, kind of like arrow functions like JavaScript, or short closures, and they've been proposed a few times. I mean, I can't make it for the core Laravel code base. It's going to look cleaner, but it's not going to make our lives any easier per se. I wish we had it though, just because I think it would look better. It would be less cumbersome, to have to specify the use variables for every closure that you define. So that, because a lot of times for me, that end up with like a long line of code, because I have to list out all those variables. If I didn't have to do that, it would just be a little bit tighter. And more clean. Other features that would be cool. I don't know. I mean, I feel like PHP's gotten so much better even since I started using it, and I didn't even come into PHP until Laravel or until PHP 5.3, which was a fairly modern version of PHP. So, but even since then, I feel like traits were really a cool feature. I just really feel like day to day, I don't run across a ton of stuff where I just really wish I had it. Oh, I do remember one feature though. What's it called? I think it's called the pipe operator in JavaScript. You Google that. Yeah. Yeah, if you Google like pipeline operator, that would be a good example of it. I think JavaScript has it, and I think Elixir has it as well. But that would be a really sick feature to have in PHP. I think that's also been proposed before. I don't know. Yeah, I see the proposal here. I don't know what the status of that is. I don't think it's even been voted on yet, but looks like it was authored by Sarah Goldman. It was proposed by her. So that would be a really slick feature. Go check that out. Go check the RFC for the pipe operator is what it's called. And they have an example of how it can clean up code, but it would make a pretty big difference. So probably pipe operator and short closures. And if I had to pick one, I might actually pick the pipe operator over short closures even. So I'll keep my fingers crossed for those.
Okay, interesting. Any other questions? Yeah, we got one at the front.
So my question is actually two questions combined. The first one is, how do you tread the line between becoming too much of an opinionated framework or like Symfony, where it's like, pick whatever you want? And my second question is, adopted Vue.js into the Laravel framework, because that means you can spin up projects really quickly. But do you feel like the Laravel community has now taken on a little bit of the burden of being the community that backs Vue.js?
I think it is a careful balance. And when I did the Vue.js thing, I wanted to make sure that there was like a really fast way to rip all that out. So that's why I kind of wanted to have that artisan, I guess it's just like PHP artisan preset none or something to rip out all the front end scaffolding. Because to me, you shouldn't be locked into any one front end framework. Obviously, it sounds like a really bad idea for a PHP framework to make that decision. So anytime I do something like that that's supposed to make people's lives easier, I try to really make it fast to just blow it all away if you don't want it, because a lot of people are really turned off by those kind of features, even though a lot of people really like them. So that's always one approach I have, is to keep it fast to get rid of it, and then also, in terms of just general features, deciding what's opinionated or what makes sense. I just try to pick the most common use cases and, optimize for those without ruling out anything else. And sometimes we have to kind of come back and like expand on those things. Like logging is a decent example of that, probably in 5.5, and then now transitioning into 5.6. With logging in 5.5, it was really sort of simplistic, and of course it was easy to use and get started with, but some more complex use cases weren't really covered. And now in 5.6, it's actually a lot more robust, and I feel like it still maintains a lot of the ease of use, but it's just more flexible and more, less opinionated about how you have to do logging. So usually I try to start simple and then let sort of community feedback drive, what needs to be more complex or more flexible towards, complex use cases. But I feel like if you start complicated, then you have to like rein it all back in, sort of like Symfony is trying to do now in some ways, with their developer experience initiatives and, Symfony Flex and stuff like that, where they're trying to sort of rein back in some of the complexity. But I think if you start simple and then sort of like keep a tight grip on it, like I think that's what's beneficial about having sort of one person man a project where you, with like Vue or Laravel, if you have one person leading a project, then you have sort of one person that can kind of safeguard that. And if it's sort of lots of people maintaining the project all at once, I think it's a little harder to do that. And I think it's why it's just sort of by nature harder for something like Symfony or Zen to safeguard against growing complexity, because they have so many people that are maintaining them. So anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I don't know. I just try to start simple and let it evolve. That way you don't have to kind of write more code than you really need. Sort of like the, you ain't going to need it principle, or the Yagni principle. I don't want to start too complex.
So to step on to another question, I have one that ability how you focus and where you focus, because I see you're very active on Twitter and of course the Slack community, the Laravel one you guys have, and obviously within the PR and actually getting real work done. Kind of curious how you might your day with regard to all the distractions out there.
So I don't get on Twitter as much as I used to, because I think that can be one of the most distracting. So I usually try to plan out what I want to tweet. I'll even have like tweets I want to tweet on my to-do list, like scheduled out. They're not like written out, but like I'll have on my to-do list, like tomorrow, tweet about some Laravel 5.6 feature maybe. And that way I'm sort of going in there with like a purpose to tweet about something that I want to tweet about that's useful. And I'm not just sort of like rambling on Twitter all day. And then also just like in practical terms, usually I have like a website blocker set up on Chrome, and I have it set up on hours. So like from 8 to 12, and then from 1 to 5, I can't access like Reddit. I can't access Twitter. I can't access YouTube, stuff like that. So that's like, just because my time is already sort of like pulled in a lot of different directions, I don't want to get distracted on anything else. So then I usually have the same routine every day. Like when I first get to the office, which is just upstairs, but when I walk up here, I answer my emails and tackle GitHub first and knock all that out. And that usually takes me, seems like around an hour to sort of get through all that. And I think GitHub stays manageable because I'm in there every day, and that's because I work on Laravel, full time. I think it would be super impossible to maintain Laravel by myself if I didn't work on it full time like I do. And then I'll just kind of hack on, whatever I need to hack on, which lately has been, the new package I'm working on. And then I'll, just kind of jump back on GitHub and my email throughout the day, as needed. But I try to avoid a lot of, just a lot of social media type stuff during the day, because it can be so distracting and I really won't get anything done, or just won't be able to focus, as well. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just like everyone else, I guess. I mean, sometimes do get distracted by just random crap, as one does on the internet, I guess. I don't know. It can be tough, and I try to stick to, a pretty set schedule and just sort of like set boundaries for myself on what I want to get done. And there's also just like the peer pressure of, if I don't work on stuff, it's going to be a really embarrassing Laracon. So in front of hundreds of people. So there is some peer pressure to actually work on stuff.
That's great. Do we have more questions?
Basically, it's a 5-minute warning to respect tailored time and.
Zonda.
The Zonda question. I'm sure you get it every time.
No, actually, I don't get it every time. That is pretty rare, actually.
That'll be the most common question.
So it was just sort of this stupid. I think I started saying it where. So we were really, Laravel's really inspired by Rails in some ways, not always really, and the syntax is not always a direct port of Rails by any means, but in the early days, Rails was definitely one of the main frameworks that we looked to for inspiration. And when I was first writing Laravel, actually, you know, if I needed to write authentication or I needed to write a database feature, I would go see, well, how do they do this in Rails, or how do they do this in some Python framework, you know, just to get other ideas outside of PHP, because they were solving, you know, the similar problems. And so Rails, I think, you know, philosophically shared a lot with Laravel, where it's sort of this curated experience that David Heinemeier Hansen was sort of giving to you. And, you know, David is a professional race car driver, and one of his personal cars is called a Zonda. And so for some reason, anytime me or Adam Wythen wrote some cool code and we were talking about Laravel, we'd be like, dang, that's really Zonda, instead of like really cool or really awesome. I don't know, it's really stupid, but that's how it started. And we just kind of ran with it. And then we just sort of just took it overboard and really wore it out probably. Anyway, this is a stupid inside joke, but.
Great. So maybe we'll have a couple more questions. Anyone next? Oh, we got one.
Yeah, I have a question. Actually, what excites you the most in your life besides software engineering and coding? And the second one, what 2 books you could recommend to read? Like everyone should read these 2 books.
What was the first question? I heard the second one.
First one, what excites you the most besides software engineering, coding, Laravel?
Okay. So lately I've been reading, getting into like exercising more. I play with my kids, you know, a lot at night. So I play iPad games with them. Like lately we've been playing like Roblox and Minecraft and stuff like that. I like to play basketball and yeah, but mainly just hanging out with my family. You know, if I'm not doing coding, I'm probably just hanging out with them because I do have 2 kids. So that, you know, obviously that's most of my time outside of the office. Books that I would recommend. Books that were really inspirational for me when I first started writing Laravel was Getting Real by what was 37 Signals at the time, which is now Basecamp. It's a free PDF book that you can get online, but it's just about building software from their perspective. The writing book, Elements of Style, it's actually like just like a how to write good English, I guess, that was actually, I think, a really good programming book. And because it's just about keeping things simple and how to write like really clearly. So I think it's good for programmers because a lot of times, you know, we're having to keep our code like really readable and simple. That's also just like a short little book, really. I think it's only about 60 or 70 pages. It's more like a booklet. So those were 2 really inspirational books. Trying to think of anything else. I know I read The Pragmatic Programmer back then and really liked it. Lately, I've been reading like more philosophy books. So I've been reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That was a really good book. So check that out if you haven't. But I actually don't read a lot of technical books, I would say. I feel like most of my like technical information comes from blogs or, you know, posts online and stuff. I don't really dig into a lot of coding books, but.
Great. So one more question. One more.
I was reading through a couple issues today and saw you, I think, like 3 times in a row. I was wondering how many times you think you turn the.
What was the question? No.
How many times does GitHub assault you every day with notifications?
Oh, I have them all turned off. I don't even get the emails or anything. So
when did you have to start turning it off? What was the threshold where you're like, oh my God, I got to turn this off?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I haven't gotten those in years, honestly. Like I haven't gotten a notification in a long time. But you know, I mean, that's also helped by the fact that Mohammed, you know, is a full-time employee of Laravel, and so I sort of let him triage things for me to where if you know, if he's keeping an eye on the issues or sort of seeing things that are broken. Usually he can let me know pretty fast. I mean, if things are legit broken, I know about it really fast because people are going to start tweeting me, within minutes, basically. So with GitHub, a lot of times what I'll do instead of using notifications is if there's a thread on, if there's an open pull request, obviously I'll see it because it's open and it's right there in front of me every morning. But if there's sort of an ongoing conversation, I'll usually just put a link to it in my to-do list, which is what I use for my to-do list. That way I just sort of reminded to go back and check it and see if there was any new posts. But it would be so many emails. Like I can't really do, the GitHub notifications like practically. So, I just sort of let Mohammed triage them and then make note, manually of stuff I want to go back and look at.
Great.
So one other thing I wanted to mention, or two things rather, Laracon.us sorry, I forget the date. I'm sure you know.
Yeah, July 25th and 26th for Laracon US, and then in August is Laracon EU, and now in and Laracon Online is in 2 weeks. So I'll be demoing new 5.6 features and also Spark 6.0, which is really the first major update to Spark. We've had lots of releases, upgrades for Spark, but they've all been sort of like bug fixes and minor improvements. This is the first one that's sort of what you probably would call a major improvement. And then I'm also demoing the new Laravel 5.6 features. That's in 2 weeks. And then so that's Laracon.net, and then Laracon US, EU, and now we have a new Laracon Australia in October, which I'm still debating if I want to fly like 37,000 hours to Australia, but I'm tempted. I'll probably end up going out there.
Oops.
And then, so with the Laracon US ticket, there's still tickets available, is that correct?
Yep, there is still tickets. It is already the largest Laracon ever in the US so far. So it's going to be pretty big. I think there's already 650 people coming. We still have, 6 months to go. I can only maybe sell like a little over 100 more. So a lot of them are already sold, and they'll probably, it's heading towards a sellout. I don't know, how they'll continue to sell, of course, but I'm really excited about the speaker lineup. Of course, I'll be there. Evan, the creator of Vue.js, Ryan Singer and Jason Fried from Basecamp will be there, which is based in Chicago. Uncle Bob Martin will be there. And then various other Laravel developers. Jocelyn Glee, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, but she's an author of a book called Unsubscribe. I'm really excited to hear her talk. So I'm really excited about this year's conference. It's a cool venue, and I think we'll have good speakers.
So Leighton, so for anybody thinking about Laracon, I've been, a couple other people here have been, if you're in the meetup group, we can messaging on Telegram, hey, we're going here after the show, all this stuff. So community event, I highly suggest it. Of course, Taylor will be there. But yeah, all here, and thank you so much for taking time out of your evening today, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Handle difficulties. Yeah. But yeah, let's just give a round of applause for Taylor.
All right, thanks, Taylor. We're gonna shut her down now.
Bye.
Have a good night, man.